All right, we're back with another episode. People, welcome back to the Men's Truth Podcast. What we're discussing today, Natu?
So I found this interesting video by popular astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson, and he was talking about art and how important it is because we live in a world where essentially arts are a meme. If you tell somebody you are pursuing the arts in this day and age, it's hard to be taken seriously. But there is something about the art that transcends, our trivial interpretation of what success is or what, meaning is. And art actually contributes to meaning. So I'm about to play the video and then we can react to it.
But here's the difference. I can discover something in the universe, but if I didn't do it, somebody else after me will discover that exact same thing. Whereas in the arts, what you create, no one who was ever born before you or will be born from your death onwards will ever compose exactly the same thing you did. So in that sense, art is a unique expression of the individual, whereas the science is the discovery of the pre-existing conditions of nature. But at the end of the day, consider that, the expression, he's got it down to a science. Well, the other side of that is that he's raised it to an art. Right? Those are two sides of the same coin.
All right. So that was astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson, a scientist through and through, but he's talking about the importance of art and why we are to value creating and composing things. And I feel like it's an interesting conversation to have now in light of how easy it is to create with, AI. You can just prompt ChatGPT to write a poem for you and it can do a pretty good job of that. You can prompt it to create a picture of something for you and it can do that. It can simulate a lot of the things we consider to be art. But there is a deep value to actually creating something yourself that I think we are at risk of losing because we are so focused on the end result. So we're not necessarily concerned about the process of creating, but we want to produce as much as we can. So we look for shortcuts through which to use art or through which to simulate art in this sense. So I wanted to get, you guys' perspective on what you think about art and how you view art now in a time where artists aren't necessarily as valued, I would say, as people in other spheres. If you are in the sciences, there tends to be a bit more premium on what you create, as opposed to someone who, let's say, they paint, they do a painting of a field, or they write a poem, or they write a song. It's not given as much time in the spotlight. So what do you guys think?
It's a lot to unpack, especially when, art is subjective, right? And when we say something is good, a painting is good or something like that, right? It is when we agree that something is good, it's intersubjectively good, right? Some people might like it, some people might like it, but enough people with influence decide that it's good, right? I also feel like the creation of art is subjective, and what actually creates the art. Yeah, there was a time we used to paint it, and then we moved to graphic design and creating art via devices, and now AI is creating it. I think subjectively there is something that we can. I honestly don't see it as problematic to consider that someone can use AI to create something that we consider to be art, right? And we could talk about the business side of it, but I think that there is a skill or a craft that goes into the creation of everything. In the context of AI, it might be prompting, but you still require imagination in order to decide what you're going to feed the AI. right?
I agree with you 100%, even on the prompt, because as Natu read, as that guy in that video stated, and what Natu said, you said, for me, art comes from the mind.
Yeah,
You sit
yeah,
down and you create it. Now, what I know about AI, being in the tech field for a while, and the little knowledge that I know on it, you actually train the AI.
right.
No two answers, I would assume, are the same unless it's a generic question. If it's based
Hmm.
off me.
Yeah,
So I
and even
remember
and even even the generic, even two same generic questions gonna
with
yield different things
different
because of,
results.
right.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah,
Because I remember there's an image that I created using ChatGPT, and I specifically said, based on who you think I am, create an image based on three birds perched up on a tree.
right, right.
And the image that it generated, I am not saying that I don't think it would generate that same image for somebody else,
Mm,
but I think it's very highly unlikely because of the information that I fed it. So I would say it's a different form of art, as,
absolutely.
as
Yeah,
opposed to not being art, because art can be anything. You have abstract, you have mosaic, you have pastel, you have all kind of different.
contemporary. You
You have
have all of it,
contemporary.
right.
When you look at real estate, you have architectural art where
Architecture. Yeah,
the
uh-huh.
designs are completely
Yeah,
different, right? And a lot of these designs, they're developed through AutoCAD, right? So it's also a technology that is making these
right,
designs.
right.
People have moved from
Yeah,
manually drawing
yeah.
on paper, right? So I just feel it's more of an advancement into a different scope. It's just
Uh,
how you utilize it. Will it be as original as, let's say, the Mona Lisa, where you sit down and you made it? Maybe not, but
yeah,
somebody else may think that intellectual property is, because it's coming from the mind of the artist at that point, which would be me, you, not or
right,
whoever
right.
is. So if I know, let's say I know Stefan is a great philosopher or a doctor or whatever, and I know him as a public person, and he showed me his AI generated masterpiece. Now,
Hmm.
if I'm a follower and admirer of Stefan's art or Stefan's work, I would probably not be opposed to purchase that art. And I would probably see it as art, even though I know he didn't physically create it. That's
Right.
that's how I look at it.
And to be honest, most of the famous stereotypical paintings that we see as significant, they're only seen as significant because of the history of the story behind it. You
Exactly.
understand what I'm saying? So Van Gogh was not successful. His paintings weren't successful until after he died, right?
Exactly.
During his lifetime, his paintings barely sold. Never mind, him probably paint out him heart and his soul, right? Good, man, I'll cut off him ear and them something, right? But it's the story behind it that makes it significant. The only thing I would argue is that some like art or something that is AI generated might not have that deep of a human story behind it. But that doesn't mean to say the thing that it creates doesn't have resonance, right? Something that you see and you're like, yo, that's a good looking picture or a good looking design, right? That's a whole other story. And of course, art or successful art has to have some resonance. But I feel like now people just say something that is AI generated isn't art because it just feels too easy. But you can't tell me some of these things that are AI generated are not art. And a banana with duct tape on the wall is considered art. You understand what I'm saying? Somebody tape a banana on a wall and that sells for millions of dollars.
You saw the
Yeah, yeah, so I think art, like Rimsey say, is the manifestation or the materializing of the imagination, right? And I feel like whether that is done through prompts or 2 years of painstaking effort in creating a sculpture or a painting, I think both things can be art.
so I think I agree, but to push back a bit, I don't think the position necessarily is that those things can't be art, but what premium do you place on actually creating something. So you can obviously you can prompt the AI to create something that has resonance, as Steph said. I believe there's a certain value that rests in creating that thing yourself. It's far more efficient, and in a lot of cases, it might be more practical.
But aren't
Just
you still creating it though?
to no, so here's where I feel like that leads to. There's a you may be familiar with the rising concerns of artists saying, we need compensation for our work because the AI is being trained on our art, and when it produces something, it is essentially violating our intellectual property, but we aren't being properly compensated for it. So it's actually a very big issue in the AI space now, and image generation and all of that. Where I would say you can say you are a great prompt artist, if that is such a thing.
You might have
But
a genre for it just now.
but I feel like even that perspective sort of trivializes what happens, because to say to take credit when the extent of your effort relative to what is produced, there's a huge gap there. So you come and you say, all right, somebody says, I need you to write a poem about the sky,
Right.
and you say, I can give you a poem in 3 seconds, and you go to the AI and you have that poem created. Nice. It is cool. I would argue that the satisfaction isn't necessarily the same as you start investing your own time and effort into it.
How
That's
you know that?
Yeah.
How
How
you
you
know
know?
that? Because satisfaction is personal. If I don't have the damn time to sit down and write a poem, but I can prompt the AI to tell it everything I want to do it, and when I read it back, it sounds damn good to me, and I
But does
tweak
that
it.
does that
Hold on, and I tweak it. For somebody else, they could see me as a poet. I wouldn't be calling myself poet, or I could actually call myself poet because I'm the one prompting it, rereading it, and tweaking it. So it might not come from the conventional poet who sits down and rhymes and sits beside the sunset and makes everything unique. Okay, fine. We still admire that form of artistry, but at the end of the day, who determines the value of the art? It's the end
Right.
user.
Yeah.
So if
I,
the end user doesn't care where it comes from, as long as it looks good or it resonates with it,
which
it's art.
which is so that point, Rimsey, what you're saying, I feel like not to I feel like we need to make a distinction between art and the craft. I feel like a lot of people now have a problem because of the craft side of it, meaning the craft of being able to write poetry or the craft of being able to paint a painting and all of those things. I feel like most of the issues is that people feel like the craft is being overlooked, meaning I go to school 4 years to learn how to paint and someone can simply generate something. So the product that I put out, someone else can sit and generate it. So imagine me spending all of my time doing this. So I feel offended because I spend time on my craft. No, I don't think that is valid, right? And even if you look at what art is by definition, it says the purpose of art. The purpose of art is self-expression, communicating ideas and emotion, preserving history and culture, social commentary, and provoking thought and reflection, right? So let's say, for argument's sake, I use AI to say, create social commentary on the role of whatnot in our society today, and make that an abstract photo, right? And make it a little bit provocative. And the image it generates is one that I say, yo, this kinda interesting, this kinda deep. Let me share that, right? Now you mentioned like the wherever the algorithm gets the inspiration from, those people are not being paid their royalties, right? Right? But I feel like again that is that craft side. They invested time in learning how to create something like this, and the AI is just collating and creating an image like that, right? But the product, as Rimsey say, if the product itself is something that makes somebody say, "Yo, that that is that's a serious image," I feel like it is serving the purpose, or at least one of the purposes of art, right? And this is not to say that it should replace or it should be replaced, right? That's not to say that. I feel like the ecosystem is expanding. Good. And by the way, what is happening now is something that has always happened, right?
Yeah.
When we had telegrams and the radio was invented, people like telegram was dead. When television was invented, people like, oh my gosh, radio is dead. But these things have changed. When the internet come, they say, all right, the internet is. I remember in 2010 they were teaching us in class that newspapers were dead, and within 5 to 10 years nobody will be reading physical newspapers anymore, right? They still exist, right? So the ecosystem is expanding, and it's not for. I don't think we should look at the creation of art, and of course we're focusing more on AI here, but I don't think we should look at it as the end of artistry altogether. And by the way, only 10% of people who go to school for art actually become artists as a career, right? So a lot of people could be trained in it, but that doesn't actually translate into actual things that are produced and circulated in mass.
So I agree. I feel like I want to pivot the conversation a bit though to talk about the and I feel like this is a sort of purist perspective on the entire conversation. But how do you, Steph, for example, in your capacity as a professor, like how do you weigh the value of effort or convey the value of effort to your students? And for you, what would prompt you to even want to impress upon them why effort is important in accomplishing?
To give you choice, to give you options, right? Okay, so I know how to change the oil in my car, right? But I choose to go to someone to change the oil for me. What that means is, in the event that I need to change it on my own, I have the ability to do so, but the choice not to do so. So even when I teach my students design, I teach them the basics as we know it. Because something as audio editing was literally using a razor blade and cutting and splicing with tape. That's the base. That's as basic as you get. But we don't teach that anymore. So the basics now is using something like the audio editing software, right? But with AI edits audio for you now, cut out all the dead, the silence and whatnot and what have you, right? But it's important for you to know how to use the basics. So if you decide to do so, you can, but also understand the context that if you generate something via AI, given the context, it's important for us to acknowledge that, because the ethics is shifting, right? So I teach both, and I don't demonize it. I think I have people in my class who are graphic design students, but I also have students who are PR students who don't know about graphic design. And both of them need to understand how to create things. Now, the level of it can change, but it's important for them to know how to create things. If they choose to use the different software, that is a different thing, right? And the example I use, especially with my colleagues, is we're only talking about this now because it's the latest thing, right? You put AI clauses in our course outlines, right? You don't put AI clauses for Google search, right? Think about it, because it's become so ubiquitous that we've accepted that it is part of our reality. No one says, if you use Google search, let us know, right? Because you should be going directly to the library and read from books. It's the same way AI is going to become so ubiquitous that it's going to be a non-starter, right? Mind you, I'm going back to it. I'm not saying that it should replace, but it is important for us to understand that it is a part of our ecosystem. And that's as far as it goes. It's part of our ecosystem.
Give another. I want to give another perspective, and I want to base it on being genuine. Let's say I'm not good with words, and I'm not as poetic as Natu. However, I want to write a love letter.
Right.
This is where I'm going. I want to write a love letter. I know the things I want to say, but I can't expound on them. I can probably say certain things. I can put jumble of words together.
Right.
I love you, yada yada yada. This is how I feel, I care, blah blah blah. And I punch it into whatever. I can't say the sun is gray, the sky
Right.
is blue, and I want to jump over the cloud just for you. I can't say that. But let's just say I pump that into
That was fire though. I ain't gonna
I
lie.
pump that I pump that into the AI and I tell it generate
Yeah.
something from me. It generates it, I read it, I tweak it a little bit. I tell it to make it sound a little bit more like me based off how it knows me speaking. Add this word, subtract this word, and I take that poem and I send it. And maybe we can, when I ask this question, put it in the notes for. I want to hear what people have to say, or women
Right.
particularly have to say. If I send that to my woman, and she doesn't know, she reads it, she loves it. Is that coming from a genuine place, or is it not?